I couldn't decide if this video should be Strawberry Letter 22 or
the greatest artist you've never heard of.
But after doing some research, I thought maybe or
Recording Heroes!
But there's so many missing parts to his history, so maybe Shuggie Otis, man of mystery. But it's all those things, so I just settled on the Shuggie Otis story. Shuggie Otis was born November 30th, 1953 in LA. His mother, Phyllis Walker, started calling him Shuggie just after he was born. It was her funny way of saying sugar. His father, Johnny Otis, was a singer, musician, composer, record producer, band leader, author, artist, talent scout, TV show host, disc jockey, A&R guy, journalist, and minister. He discovered, wrote for, and produced many legendary artists, and has been called the godfather of R&B. Shuggie spent a lot of time with his dad, and he also spent a lot of time watching his dad's band rehearse in the living room. He wanted to play the drums, so his father bought him a drum kit for Christmas. Around 11 years old, Shuggie switched to guitar, and he practiced all the time. He dreamed of having fame, and everybody around him figured he'd have it. As a matter of fact, it was expected. Now, his father had an 8-track studio in the garage, and Shuggie had been watching sessions there since he was a child. When he was 12, his father asked him to play on a couple songs he was producing, and Shuggie, of course, did a great job. So his father started having him play on sessions. Shuggie worked with some amazing, legendary artists, including Etta James, Eddie Vinson, Richard Berry, Louis Jordan, and Bobby Blue Bland. This went on for years. He would also go out and play shows with his dad's bands. When he was really young, he would sometimes have to put on a hat and a fake mustache if they were playing a late-night club. This is Johnny Otis doing a show with his son in the band. This is like 1970, 71. They're backing up the legendary Roy Buchanan. Cool. This is from a little later in the same show. Now, who does Shuggie remind you of? Come on, I mean, just look at that.
I'm going home and leave you, baby.
Just imagine standing there playing with legends and that kind of experience. I mean, it's incredible. Look at that. I'm gonna leave a link to this full video in the description. He was doing gigs like that and studio sessions since before he was a teenager. In fact, he'd probably done his 10,000 hours before he even could get a driver's license. Now, back to when he was a teenager, his dad had been invited to Frank Zappa's studio. You see, Frank Zappa was a huge fan of Johnny Otis. This was during a time when Zappa had been working on songs for a new album. Johnny took Shuggie along, and they all ended up jamming. Zappa and Shuggie on guitars, and Johnny on organ. I actually found a recording of this jam session on YouTube.
Called Frankie and Shuggie.
It's just the audio. I'll put a link to the whole recording in the description. Later, Zappa had Shuggie play bass on a song called Son of Mr. Green Jeans, which ended up on the Hot Rats album. Zappa loved both of the Otises so much that he called the Bihari brothers, who ran Modern, Kent, and RPM Records, and he told them that they needed to record an album with the Otises. This led to the 1968 album Cold Shot, which was credited to The Johnny Otis Show, featuring Mighty Mouth Evans and Shuggie Otis on Kent Records. That record was successful enough to get the attention of Columbia Records, who signed both Johnny and Otis to the label, and that led to Otis being at the Columbia Records Music Convention in 1969, where he met the legendary record producer, musician, composer Al Kooper. Kooper asked Shuggie to be the featured artist on the second volume of his Kooper Sessions, which was part of the Super Sessions album series that Kooper was putting out at the time. This was a really big deal because there had been a lot of huge stars already featured on these albums. Kooper and Shuggie, who was 15 at the time, did the whole album in one weekend in New York. This album really got Shuggie introduced to the public and helped propel his already growing reputation. In 1970, when Shuggie was 17 or 18 years old, he put out his first album called Here Comes Shuggie Otis. It was produced, arranged, and co-written with his father, Johnny. And what I found kind of interesting is that his dad actually wrote a lot of the lyrics. This is the first song from the album called Oxford Gray. And I would call this like a musical movement because of all the parts, like... And then, I love how they put the flanger chorusing effect on the drums, which is something people used to do a lot back then. I think it's really cool. I think they do it again here. Nice. Now there's another section of the song. I really like this part here. Let me find it. It's right. Oh yeah, check this part out. This is amazing. That is not what I expected, but that's pretty damn cool. This one is called Jenny Lee. It's very different, very beautiful, very regal. And it's interesting having listened to a lot of his later stuff that you can hear with his voice, he's still coming into his voice. He's still learning how to sing. It's not what I was used to hearing. Check this out. Love that 12 string. So beautiful.
Everywhere I look, everything I see.
This song is the one that I found the most interesting from the album, and that's for a couple reasons. One is, as I said before, there's so little information about Shuggie Otis, and I just struggled to find anything, but in this song, he actually talks. You can hear him telling his story, and it's the only thing I've been able to find of him really talking back then. And the other reason is because I want you to remember this guy was like 17 or 18 years old, and when he talks and plays, it's just, well, listen to this. I'm just going to play this whole section. It's pretty amazing.
You know, sometimes when I'm fooling around with my guitar, I think back a few years to when I was first starting out. And I remember some of the first blues licks I learned to play. I remember hearing Pete Lewis, Jimmy Nolan, and Mel Brown with my father's band. They were fine bluesmen. And of course, the great B.B. King. And my man T-Bone Walker. And Pee Wee Creighton, Johnny Moore, Robert Johnson, Freddie King, and the great Son House. And don't forget Elmore James. And then a few years ago, I remember things got kind of rough, and my father put together a little R&B group with Delmar Evans, Sugar Cane Harris, and the Mighty Flea, and some more cats. We went out and played some funky little gigs, and I used to wear dark glasses and paint a mustache on, so I'd look older than I really was. Some of the joints we played were kind of depressing, but we had a cooking little band. We had a lot of fun, especially when we played the blues. Here's one of the things I used to like. Give me a little drum beat, Avy.
What a treasure. What a treasure. I'm going to put a link in the description to where you can hear this whole album on YouTube. It's pretty cool. Shuggie's second record, Freedom Flight, came out in 1971, and once again his dad produced it, and they had an amazing collection of musicians and singers on the album. But Shuggie had a way larger role in this album, doing a lot of the arrangements and writing most of the songs. And I think that's why it sounds so much more powerful and bold, and I think he found his voice.
Friday, everything is beautiful. Saturday, we have no peace. Sunday, we go to church, and Sunday night, that woman calls the police, talking about me and that woman. Well,
song is called Me and My Woman, and it's night and day from the last record. I mean, this is jamming.
And the next day we're doing fine.
This one is called Ice Cold Daydream, and there's a few really cool things about this one, like this verse here. Check this out. Listen to the bass.
I looked at you, girl, I saw a smile.
Then the organ.
For my love, you said you'd walk a mile.
It's like where they're playing, the tones they're doing, it's kind of hard to tell who's doing what exactly.
Now you're telling me that I'm a clown.
I also like the way they're doing a lot of stuff with distortion and filtering on a lot of the instruments, especially guitar. Check this out. You know, it sounds to me like he's using a Crybaby wah-wah pedal into some sort of like auto filter, probably something that would have been the precursor to this, which came out a few years later, but badass tones. Just amazing. But most people remember this album and Shuggie from this song. This is Strawberry Letter 23.
Hello, my love.
Both the album and the song reached the Billboard charts. Now, what's interesting is he never actually says Strawberry Letter 23 in the song. What he actually says is this.
A present from you, Strawberry Letter 22.
Now, the reason he does that is because the premise of the song is that he and his lover are writing letters to each other, and they number them. So she had written him Strawberry Letter 22, which he is responding to, so he's actually currently writing Strawberry Letter 23. But my favorite part of the song is actually this whole end part right here. I love this harmonized guitar part here. And also how they got the vocals kind of run through a flanger or something, and then all the stuff on the right, like a hi-hat, I think it sounds like they got jingle bells in there. It's just magnificent. And right here. It's like a dream. And then when it gets to the end, I just remember as a kid listening to that and going, wow, that's the way to end a song. But years later, when I got back into listening to Shuggie's music and this song in particular, I kept thinking, there's something different about the song, there's something missing, and then I remembered this. This is the Brothers Johnson. They covered the song later on and had a huge hit with it. This version was produced by Quincy Jones.
Hello, my love. I heard a kiss
Pretty cool.
from you.
And I like that they put this guitar part in it again. They had Lee Ritenour play guitar on the recording. The success of Freedom Flight and Strawberry Letter 23 led to a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, and expectations. Now, his father somehow convinced the record label to give them funding to build their own studio instead of a typical record advance. So they built a 16-track studio in their backyard. And his father said, go for it. Shuggie did everything himself, all the engineering, mixing, production, arrangement. And it was the first time he'd worked without his father. This was finally his chance to make a record the way he wanted to. An exploration of his art. And completely separate from outside influence. You gotta understand, back then it was considered wrong, unwise, or weird to engineer, mix, produce, write, whatever, on the same project. And it was even worse if it was your own music. I remember many times being told that I shouldn't be doing all the things that I do on the same project, and that was back in the 80s. I could go into all the reasons why, but I always thought it was just stupid, so I ignored them. And now it's kind of the accepted way to do things. I mean, look how we work now. But back then, I'm sure it rubbed some people the wrong way. But back in the studio, alone with his own thoughts, no interruptions, he could follow his inspiration wherever it led. Having his own studio, he could take his time as well. And like Prince, he wrote and arranged all the songs and played all the instruments, except for a few horn and string parts. This was Shuggie being Shuggie. This was personal. And so much of this album seems more like a marvelous train of thought or a dream than a arrangement or a composition. This one is called Out of My Head, which I relate to. Although he had used drum machines in the past, he really brought them out to the forefront on this album, both blending them with real drums and as the main drum beat. That was a little unusual back then, but listening to the sound of it, I think he's probably using one of these. I've listened to this album countless times, and I'm still surprised. I think it's a masterpiece. However, it took 3 years to finish. And it wasn't what everybody expected. Even though it was a highly anticipated album, it only had one single reach the Billboard 100. The momentum he had built up over the years was gone. However, he was still respected and sought out. Soon after the album came out, Billy Preston, who was playing keyboards with the Rolling Stones, approached him about joining the band for their upcoming world tour. Shuggie declined the offer. He said no to David Bowie, Spirit, Buddy Miles, Blood, Sweat and Tears, and others. He told Quincy Jones, who wanted to help produce his next album, that he didn't need a producer. Now you gotta remember, even though he was young, he'd been making records for years with stars, traveling the world, learning and growing. He was just coming into his own. He didn't want to be anybody else's sideman. He didn't want anyone else calling the shots. He wanted to be his own man, doing his own thing. And he did. And he made a record that was ahead of its time. But that wasn't enough for the record label, and soon he was dropped. He kept recording and sending out tapes assuming he'd get another deal. I mean, after all, his last single had charted, and so far, his life momentum had seemed preordained. But he just couldn't get a deal. And back then, if you didn't have a record deal, you pretty much didn't have a career. So, he kind of disappeared. I thought about this a lot when I started getting into Shuggie's music and learning about his life. Why would he turn down these opportunities? But as my career grew and my life changed, I think I started to understand it a little better. Now, I am not comparing myself to him. I am no Shuggie Otis. Working with superstars is really not that much fun, and I got into this for the music. I also wanted to live my life a certain way, and that's what drives my choices. I once didn't follow a particularly famous artist down to Florida for a year because I wanted to do my own thing, but I'd already done a huge record with him. And at some point, I suddenly went from rap music into bluegrass. I mean, everybody thought I was crazy. I've been told many times, you're throwing your career away. And you know what? I might have made more money if I had followed that beaten path. But I wouldn't have accomplished what I've accomplished, I wouldn't have had those experiences, and I wouldn't have such a wide range of great-sounding records. I'm just telling you all this to say that I think I get it now, and that this industry and the world does not like it when you don't do what's expected of you. But back to the story. Shuggy's music had not disappeared. In fact, it had gained a cult following. In 2001, Inspiration Information was re-released on Luaka Bop, which is a label owned by David Byrne from the Talking Heads. This re-release contained 4 songs from Shuggy's second album, Freedom Flight. Now, I first found out about this record when an artist that I had worked with, Julian Whisperlink, who happened to be working at Criminal Records at the time, came across it and thought I'd like it. He gave me this copy, and soon it became my and my wife's favorite record. I mean, we played this thing so many times, it became like the soundtrack of a big part of our life. But we weren't the only ones. People had been sampling his music for years.
I wanna see you real bad.
This is actually from the Brothers Johnson version of Strawberry Letter 23. And they continue to sample his music.
And if we break up, I only make up time. My team.
I wish I could look in your eyes and tell you how I feel right now inside.
I like that.
Hello, my love. I heard this from you. Red magic sadly playing it too.
This is the Brother Johnson's version.
Kellogg's Special K Red Berries.
Another interesting thing is how many times people have done an interpolation of Strawberry Letter 23. An interpolation is when you take somebody's melody and put it in your song, often changing the lyrics.
All through the morning rain, I guess the sun doesn't shine.
This is the original.
And waterfalls run through my mind. In the garden, I see was purple shower bells and tea, orange birds and river cousins dressed in green.
Never meant to make your daughter cry. I apologize a trillion times. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I am for real. Never meant to make your daughter cry. I apologize a trillion times. It feels like something's heating up. Can I leave them shoes?
Ladies, I don't know, but I'm thinking all the flashing lights up on a tree, the house lit up nice. With your family, it's where you wanna be. Here on Christmas night. I love the way you make me feel. It's lost in time.
Come on.
I'm in my bedroom and turn off the light.
And there's more. As the internet grew, Shuggy and his music began to emerge from mystery. Yes, he was still alive. Yes, he was still playing music. People had started uploading video clips of him playing gigs at various clubs and venues. And eventually, the interest got to the point where in 2013, a tour was announced. Shuggy would be coming to Atlanta, Georgia. My wife and I were standing in the audience, and the anticipation was so intense. And when he walked out on stage wearing those knee-high leather boots and looking so cool, I screamed. And several times during the show, I fist pumped. And I don't ever fist pump. And Crystal and I sang along, and we danced, and we danced, and we got a few looks. But it was amazing. That same year, he released another album called Inspiration Information, Wings of Love. This is a compilation of the original album plus 14 unreleased songs that he recorded between 1975 and 2000. In 2018, he released a new album called Interfusion on Cleopatra Records with Carmine Appice on drums and Tony Franklin on bass. I listened to it, It's not what I expected, but it's definitely Shuggie being Shuggie. There's so much more I could say. I just feel like I'm scratching the surface because every time I find something new or an answer to part of his story, I just end up with more questions. As a matter of fact, I was going to end the video here, but just today I was reviewing his discography and I found something kind of interesting. Check this out. So I was looking at the Discogs website to verify a date and something caught my eye and I'm like, wait, why is Andy Falco's name next to Shuggie Otis? Huh? Andy Falco is a good friend of mine and the guitar player and one of the singers for the Grammy-winning Infamous String Dusters who I've done a few albums with. So I give Andy a call.
So a good friend of mine, Mark Lotito, got to know Shuggie, and I've met him a few times. So my friend, this is years and years ago, he was just writing these tunes, and he was just recording them at home. And he had me do some stuff on the record. He had people like Jimmy Vivino and friends of his. He's friends with a lot of people, a lot of musicians, and Shuggie too. I think it started with the Shuggie, he did a couple tunes with Shuggie in California because Shuggie was they were friends, and she was like, yeah, sure, man, I'll co-record with you. So they did a few of these tunes. And that's kind of what that record is. The tunes that I played on that record, some of them were just things that I just made up on the spot. And then they would just sort of take it and edit it and add stuff maybe to it or not,
So is it a Shuggie Otis record or a compilation?
No, it's my friend Mark did it, and he, I don't even think he put his name on the record. I think he just called it November, and I think it's just various artists. He just put everyone's name on the record, kind of. It's this crazy, sick New York players,
Wow. So have you hung out with Shuggie?
Yeah, he's such a fucking great musician. I never saw one of his concerts, but I used to see him when he'd come to New York, and he would sit in with Vivino. And I've watched him play with people in a club in New York, just on stage, just ripping. Man. If I remember correctly, those were always on Thursday nights, and maybe it was I wasn't going to go in, and Mark was like, "Come on, you should go. Shuggie's going to be there. It'll be cool." I'm like, "Oh man, all right, fine." I think I remember he played one solo at one point, and I just looked at Mark and said that solo was worth being here, just to hear that solo that he just took. That was worth. I'm going to be dead at work tomorrow, but hearing that one solo was worth it.
Wow.
I remember him being not at all pretentious in any way, but yet just, definitely the most brilliant musician in the room by far, probably anywhere he goes.
Wow.
He's so damn good, but I don't know, that's the sense I always got from him, is that he was just kind of this, just such an artist,
And the story goes on and on. If you'd like to learn more about Shuggie and hear some of his music, I'll be leaving some links in the description. I'm going to end this video with part of an interview that Shuggie did in 2019.
You can't choose your time. It comes around. Either it comes for you, it comes to you, or it doesn't. And sometimes people give up when it doesn't come around. The thing is, I never quit, I always knew I'd want to come back. I'm not going to stop now. I'm very happy about it. Very happy about what's going on now, because kind of 40 years I've been waiting, for this.
Remember to subscribe, hit the like button, share, check out my Patreon, and most of all, be unique.